One of several needs for the Minnesota Vikings this offseason is wide receiver. They need one bad. And with defenses being more prone to throwing double teams at Justin Jefferson, you need somebody that can keep the secondary honest. And with Adam Thielen, the season that he had last year, major regression, a $20 million cap hit for 23. I think he's played his last game as a Viking, and I do believe he'll be a post-June 1st cut. KJ Osborne had a strong finish to the season. He'll be your wide receiver 3, but wide receiver 2 is completely up in the air right now. You've got TJ Hawkinson. He's going to draw linebacker / safety coverage, but even if he sees a safety, if I'm a defense, I have no problem having the opposite safety double up Jefferson with the outside corner, leaving the other 3 playmakers on an island in single coverage. KJ Osborne as a wide receiver 3, he's solid. Can he lead your team to victory? Because that's what it's going to take to beat us. With that said, wide receiver targets for the Minnesota Vikings in this upcoming draft. And let me just start by saying honorable mention here. As much as I love Jordan Addison, the consensus is he'll be a top 15 pick. And with the Vikings at pick 23 and needing to trade down, unfortunately, Jordan Addison to Minnesota is fiction. With that said, we're going to start off with Jalin Hyatt, wide out of the University of Tennessee. Last year, he had 67 catches, 1,267 yards, and 15 touchdowns. This is a true deep threat vertical playmaker. He'll break defenders off with his speed and route running. You leave him one-on-one single coverage, he will absolutely make you pay. Now, this is a guy where if he falls and he's available at 23 and he's your guy, you got to take him there. I don't think you can trade back and expect for Jalin Hyatt to still be available, especially with the Giants at 25 and Cowboys at 26. Next up, we've got Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver out of The Ohio State. A hamstring injury derailed his 2022 season. He played in just 3 games last year for the Buckeyes, so you have to go back to 2021 for context on him as a player. 95 catches, 1,606 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I love his versatility. There's not a route that he can't make a play on, and with his yards after the catch ability, you can use him in the screen game as well. He did most of his damage as a slot receiver, and I'm just thinking about him along with TJ Hawkinson just eating in the middle of the field. Yes, please. Next, we're going to talk about Zay Flowers, receiver out of Boston College. 78 catches, 1,077 yards, 12 touchdowns. Now, his frame may be viewed by some as a negative, listed at 5'10", 177 pounds. But let me tell you something right now. His footwork is incredible. It reminds me of Kadarius Toney. Has no problem creating separation. And I can totally see him in Kevin O'Connell's offense with the pre-snap motion followed by the post-snap big play. Zay Flowers is going to be a problem. We're now going to talk about Rashee Rice, receiver out of SMU. Last year, 96 catches, 1,355 yards, and 10 touchdowns. I can only describe him as a guy, just throw it up to him and watch him go get it. Great strides in his run, get the football in his hands, get out the way, let him cook. And this is a guy that you can get in the second round if the Vikings manage to get one, that is. And lastly, we're going to talk about Xavier Hutchinson, receiver out of Iowa State. Big receiver listed at 6'3", 210 pounds last year for the Cyclones, 107 catches, 1,171 yards receiving, and 6 touchdowns. Versatile receiver, he can play outside or in the slot. Can be a deep threat, but does most of his work in the intermediate passing game, fights through contact for tough grabs, and is really hard for defenders to bring down once he has the ball in his hands. This is going to be a day 2 pick. I'm leaning more towards the 3rd round versus the 2nd. Now, another option that the Vikings could elect to utilize is free agency. Wide receiver is a need, and if you can address that through free agency to where you don't have to draft one, that'd be huge, because the Vikings only have 4 picks before any trade downs happen or any compensatory picks are added. Outside of wide receiver, you still have to address center and 5 positions on defense. And we're just talking about starters here. 6 players on defense if Dalvin Tomlinson walks. Now, as far as the available pool of receivers in free agency, it's not necessarily anything to raise hell about, except I would say Jakobi Meyers. Last year, 67 catches, 804 yards, 6 touchdowns. On the surface, it's like, oh, okay, whatever. With Matt Jones throwing him the football, that's amazing. I think Jakobi Meyers is a heck of a football player, and with better quarterback play, his stats will jump up no problem. Now, Spotrac, they estimate his market value at $12 million a year. I think if you can get him at $10 million a year, I'd entertain it. And spare me with what money? The Vikings, they have no cap space. The Vikings can create cap if they wanted to. If you cut Zadarius Smith, trade Dalvin Cook, cut Eric Kendricks, Jordan Hicks, CJ Ham, Chris Reed, Ross Blacklock, restructure Brian O'Neill, you've got nearly $28 million in cap immediately available for use. Go through the draft or sign Jakobi Meyers to address the wide receiver 2 position. The Hot Boys 12 says, I have a really good feeling for wide receiver Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. If we snag him, then our offense will be elite. Grab a running back from free agents, draft for the defense the rest of the draft. So it's interesting because, like I mentioned earlier, with Jalen Hyatt, I think if you're going to take him, you got to take him at 23. I think the Vikings should trade down, but I don't think they can trade down and still expect for him to be available. And I want Jalen Hyatt as much as anybody. So just think about it. If they take him at 23 and you still expect, if you're the Vikings, to get into the second round, you could have done that potentially by trading down. But if you still want to get into the second round, you're now going to have to trade up with 3 picks left available in the 2023 draft. You're going to have to use one of those picks and maybe a future pick and have 2 picks left after that. It's going to be tough, but I wouldn't blame the Vikings if they went ahead and took Hyatt at 23. That's all I'm going to say. Marty Sheets says, no, get a young center first. Okay, let's talk about that. So everybody knows I've made it clear John Michael Schmitz, that's the guy that I really like. And this is all pending based off of the different mocks that I've seen. He can go either in the first or the second round. But let's say for this situation, he goes to the second round. The Vikings, they trade down in the first round and get a second round pick. So in the first round, they go defense. Let's say defensive line or edge, so to speak. Second round, John Michael Schmitz. What? In the third round, and I'm going to assume trading down, you get an additional third round pick. Let's say they do 2 trade downs. One of those third round picks, Hendon Hooker, another third round pick, defense. And let's say they go defense the rest of the way. Jakobi Meyers as a free agent. What? I'm down for that. Now, alternatively, let's say John Michael Schmitz, he goes in the first round, or they miss out in the second round on him. Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin, if you can get him in the later rounds, that's a good consolation prize for me. And lastly, TJ says, only Stroud and Young are first round value. Richardson and Levis are both projects. I think Hendon Hooker has better footwork in the pocket than Levis and AR. He would be a better pick at the end of the second or top of the third than either of the other 2 in the first. Listen, man, Bryce Young to me is the for sure fire pick that you can't miss on. The only question about him is his durability, his small frame. Can he last at the next level? That's a whole different conversation. CJ Stroud is something about Ohio State quarterbacks I just can't get down with. He did well in the playoffs against Georgia, but the game of the year for Ohio State every season is what? Michigan. At your house. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I can't shake that game. But let's say that he's even successful. There are always going to be reaches at the quarterback position in the first round. There are always going to be disappointments. And I think that is Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. So Hendon Hooker, I'm all in for him in the third round. Second round late, I guess I can settle for that. I would probably want at least 2 players before you go Hendon Hooker. But if they do it and it's the end of the second round, so be it. We're back at it tomorrow. We'll see you then.